Yeah, easier said than done, my friend. Easier said than done, but certainly important skills for companies, business owners, and just humans to learn. It would be a beautiful thing if we could meet our own needs,
Yes.
continue to be the amazing people with the gifts that we have and know what they are. Also, know our blind spots and work on those to have less of a negative effect so that we could all show up in every conversation and hear the other person and see the other person and feel equally heard and seen. My goodness. Welcome to Inspiration Contagion, where we spread inspiration one story at a time. I am your host, Holly Jean Jackson. Each interview spotlights transformational business leaders, their stories, challenges, and advice for how you too can lead yourself and others through inspiration. Learn how you too can achieve peak performance, build more revenue, and lead the legacy you were meant to lead. Hello, and welcome back to episode 115 of Inspiration Contagion. This week, my guest is Lambers Fisher, and he is a marriage and family therapist, author, and national speaker on the topic of multicultural awareness and diversity. With over 20 years of therapeutic experience, Lambers offers positive, practical, and shame-free strategies for reducing unintentional cultural differences and repairing cross-cultural personal and professional relationships. For more information and to find Lambers online, first of all, the links will be in the show notes as well as the YouTube notes, but you can find him at diversitymadesimple.com. With that, welcome, Lambers.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Thanks for the welcome.
You are so welcome. So we're going to unpack this as we get to know Lambers. That was a lot of words, a lot of complicated things that we certainly need in this world. So I want to kick it off with what makes you such an inspirational leader in your space, or what's your secret sauce?
Well, I try to be inspirational in the sense that my genuine desire to help other people improve their lives motivates everything that I do. It's less about a program, it's less about a particular strategy, as much as how can I, one relationship at a time, help make somebody else's life better. And in that way, I don't always know exactly what I say that's going to have the best impact. But if I'm trying to empower people as much as possible, if I'm trying to help meet a need, then I can be pleasantly surprised right along with them, and that can drive everything that I do. So that genuineness, that authenticity, usually speaks louder than any sound bite or any one gem that I have to offer, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, and that's what we're all about with Inspiration Contagion, is spreading inspiration like wildfire. And that is the ripple effect happens one person, one story, one company, one leader at a time. And my goodness, we are certainly in the age of authenticity. And I think people say that it's overused, but it doesn't necessarily actually ring true. But with Lambers, it is certainly true. I wanted to ask you too, what does inspiration mean to you in the space that you work in?
Well, I wear two different hats. Partially, I'm a marriage and family therapist, and so I'm not coming at inspiration from a sense of I know it all. I've seen everything, and I'm bestowing my wisdom down from on high. As much as I've seen a handful of things, I've been taught a handful of things, and I want to offer as much as I can to help you live your best life. I'm not saying I've lived it all, but if I can help you do things that I haven't done or I haven't done in my own way, but to help you live your relationship, not my own relationship, that I can inspire you and then be pleasantly surprised by how it looks on your end. And that has allowed me to do some things on the marriage and family therapy space. And then bringing those same tips and strategies and motivations to the multicultural awareness and diversity space. It's the same idea. I don't come at cultural competence from a policy and procedure manual type of perspective, as opposed to just like I'm helping couples strengthen their relationships and help avoid misunderstandings that damage relationships. I'm helping people avoid misunderstandings with their bosses or with their colleagues to help strengthen those relationships and inspire them to endure when things get discouraging, inspire them to speak clearly when things get frustrating and you feel like you shouldn't have to, but to help you realize that those relationships are worth maintaining. those relationships are with people who have a lot more pros than the cons that seem evident at the time. And if I can inspire them to do things differently to make things better, then the relationships that they maintain can actually empower them and inspire them moving forward, which makes it all worth it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So this episode will be live in the new year in 2025, but for those listening, we're recording this shortly after the election. So I imagine that there's a lot of interesting things you can do that cross reference and cross the tides of how we come back to the middle of relationships and the fact that our differences are actually valuable. So it's just kind of interesting. We're talking about the work that you do and your brilliance and zone of genius right after things that are polarizing our world at the moment. So I'm sure that is very interesting. So, kind of a side note, I wanted to ask you to share with our listeners what it means to work in the multicultural awareness space for people that aren't familiar with what you do.
Yes, a lot of times when I get a chance to not only counsel couples or different kinds of family relationships that feel like they're coming from different cultural perspectives, or also when I'm doing trainings for small organizations, large organizations, schools, businesses, things like that, I'm coming at it from a place where people are often saying, "Yeah, I've gone through those kind of trainings before. I always felt mad, angry, resentful. I felt that the facilitators of those trainings made me more upset. I hate that DEI stuff." And that's usually where I can pleasantly surprise people. Says, "Oh, I'm not trying to do any of that. I'm not trying to tell you all the things that you should be doing but are not doing, and all the ways in which if you don't know this, then you're really a bad person." Those things are more discouraging than encouraging and inspiring. And instead, I like to help people realize that you don't have to know everything all the time in order to have a positive impact on someone. You can take what you know. You can show that despite your lack of perfect cultural knowledge on everything that you haven't experienced, you have a genuine desire to understand the person in front of you, to see the needs of the person in front of you, to say, how can I see your needs and understand and help meet your needs? And hopefully you can do the same thing in return. And we can make one decision, one healthy decision at a time. And especially when things are polarized, and a lot of times people feel, or dare I say, fear, that people who have differing views are the enemy. They want what's worst for you, as opposed to people similarly fearing that their needs aren't going to get met, and so they react desperately. And when we can reassure and inspire, then we can get a lot more done together, collaboratively, than oppositional.
Yeah, oh my goodness. Wouldn't it be just delightful if we lived in a world where people had the tools in their toolkit and the resources and the ability to have what we call, polarized, extreme differences of opinion and actually hear each other, not be in so much fear, not have shame, come to the middle and have real solutions. That's my preaching moment for today, you guys. We're going to move a little bit to peak performance because otherwise we'll go down a totally different conversation. So Lambers, I wanted to ask you, how do you define peak performance and the work that you do, especially in family marriage counseling as well as multicultural space? And how did you arrive at your definition of peak performance today?
Well, in addition to being a therapist, I often get a chance to train other therapists. I've been doing this for over 20 years now, so I get a chance to teach, supervise, and bring aspiring therapists up in their journey into bringing their academic knowledge into real life empowerment and inspiration. And one of the things that's helped me there is a continuing reminder with students of varying age ranges, new and seasoned life experience, is to help people maximize their pros, their strengths, and accommodate their cons, their growth areas. It's not about good versus bad, but to say, how can I help you identify your strengths? Because we may not always see what of our traits are actually our strengths, and our growth areas, to acknowledge that doesn't necessarily have to be something that knocks us out of the ability to help people, but say, how can I put certain supports, certain structures, certain accommodations in place in order to reduce the negative impact, or reduce the impact of those. And so that balance of maximizing our pros and reducing our cons can be great for self-esteem, can be great for efficacy in whatever we put our hands to.
Yeah. My goodness. And what you do with people personally is what I do with them in their business and help them with where they have their blind spots and weaknesses and need somebody else to come in because they don't want to learn that. They want to stay in their zone of genius where their strengths are, right?
Yeah.
So for me in business, a little different than personal development. Just a little bit. They have like complementary tie-ins, but I like to help them outsource their weaknesses or hire based on their weaknesses and
Nice.
remain like lean on trusted advisors where they have those blind spots or weaknesses. A little different than therapy, but similar to some degree. But that's
Nice.
an amazing tool to give them. And man, we all need people to see our blind spots because we all have them.
There you go.
Yeah. So, Lambers, what are some of the challenges or obstacles that you faced along your journey to peak performance in your business today?
Yes, a lot of times I find that things that seem oppositional, so much so that they seem insurmountable, relationship barriers, are often just indicative of fears that seem too big of a barrier to see past. Again, it's not that my partner or my spouse, my family member, my coworker wants the exact opposite of what I want, as much as they want something, and it's hard for them to see past the legitimate need that is motivating that want, to be able to see somebody else has a need too. So much so that even the word compromise often has a negative connotation. Compromise can easily mean, okay, you get a little bit what you want, I get a little bit what I want, we both get what we want. Versus when you are hungry for something, when you're longing for something, compromise sounds like settling. So you mean I'm not going to get all that I want, and I have to lessen the value of what I want, and you're going to give me some excuse as to why that's okay. It's like, well, if it's mutually beneficial, then we can both get a little bit of a win as opposed to fight for a win-lose 100% to zero. And so that idea that says you can make the most of that appetizer, and maybe not necessarily be the perfect entree you were hoping for, but that way everybody gets fed, and two fed people can brainstorm better about how we can continue continue to meet more needs as opposed to who has to lose, and then it's a fight for the right to have needs, and then we can have a healthier conversation as a result.
That applies to a lot of things, right? So, whether it's in the business world, that could be working two co-founders. Where it's interesting. A lot of the work I do is really around consulting, but it's also I feel like a glorified therapist sometimes. Lambert, don't tell
Nice.
everybody. Although now they know my secret is out. Oh goodness. But a lot of people I've worked with, they've had struggles with a co-founder or a business partner, or somebody that's in their business, right? They're outsourcing an arm of something, and they're having conflict. And I think oftentimes this comes to a T when they're in an extreme growth phase. It can be really challenging to stay ahead of that acceleration, and it's hard to, as you said, be fed when you're growing that fast because you're burning the candle at both ends if you
Yeah.
haven't put the right structure in place. But
Mhm.
I love that, I guess, synonym or visual of people's needs being met and fed, and like feeding your own self and fueling your own self, because then you can actually come to the table, the dinner table, so to speak, and
Yes.
have a conversation without that starvation, right? Like, so you can actually do
Absolutely.
that. Um, and I imagine in some of your training, you kind of allude to bits and pieces of this so that people can have those difficult conversations. Can you maybe share a story around that?
Yeah, so a lot of times when end up speaking to leaders in different organizations, they have experience with having to choose which group, which cultural group, whether it be age or ethnicity or socioeconomic status or political views, who they're going to focus on, and thus who's going to lose out as a result. And when you can expand one's view such that you're not saying, okay, well, who's complaining the most, so that we can focus all of our energy on them so that they don't complain, and then it's resented, it's regretted, and then everybody else says, okay, so when's the focus going to be on me? Because if there's this 100% view, 100% focus, and then 0% everything else, then everyone loses. As opposed to recognizing that everybody can feel heard and seen in different ways. Everybody can feel helped, and even when you're helping other people, you can help from a space of You remember how it felt to be unheard. Let's help that other person feel heard. You remember how it felt to be unseen and misunderstood. Let's help them be misunderstood because it might be you next time. And so it's from a place of genuine care, and you're inspiring others to genuinely care as opposed to pity the person who's complaining the most. And then cultural competency becomes less of a burden, a charity case for certain groups, as much as how can we create a culturally safe environment where everybody, no matter how they identify, can feel just as welcome every day, one day at a time. Because hey, it maybe need you next time, or maybe you, while you're helping someone else, you're empathizing in a way that you didn't empathize with before. You're understanding, and it becomes a mutually beneficial challenge as opposed to a burden that we have to do and wonder when we can get past this thing and get back to normal. That can be the new normal. Care for everyone and mutual inspiration.
Yeah. Easier said than done, my friend. Easier said than done, but certainly important skills for companies, business owners, and just humans to learn. It would be a beautiful thing if we could meet our own needs,
Yes.
continue to be the amazing people with the gifts that we have and know what they are. Also, know our blind spots and work on those to have less of a negative effect so that we could all show up in every conversation and hear the other person and see the other person and feel equally heard and seen. My goodness, we wouldn't have many problems in the world if we could all do that. Just saying, just saying. That would be beautiful. All right. Well, we're going to pivot to one of my favorite things to talk about, and that is revenue and money, because that's what we do. We help people go big to give big. I want to ask you, when have you left money on the table in your business, and what did you do to fix it?
Well, as a therapist, I often had that dilemma since the very beginning between how can I help as many people as possible without letting money be a barrier to doing so. Most of the therapists I know, well-intentioned folks, would honestly say, "Hey, if I could do all this for free and my bills be paid, and I still have groceries, then hey, that'd be awesome." Because the money isn't necessarily the focus, and yet we need that in order to keep the lights on and do that. So there have been several times when either in my therapy side of my therapy world or the training world where it's like, hey, we could benefit from that training, but we don't have the big budget to do that, to hire some big keynote speakers to do that. And instead of having this difficulty between, well, I need to focus on income, I need to focus on that speaker fee per se, and it's either all or nothing, then I've learned to have a balance where there are certain times when if the budget is there, then I'll focus on those type of environments and particularly seek out the type of conference training or a large corporation that has a budget for doing so with the explicit purpose to say, I don't mind doing that fee because that can compensate for me reaching out to the nonprofit, the organization that doesn't have any budget whatsoever. And I don't have to feel like I'm making it difficult for me to feed my family in order to help out those who need it. And so that balance has helped me to say, okay, well, I can say I can do this pro bono. I can do this one just because I see and value the need and don't want you guys to feel left out, while also not feeling imposter syndrome and say, well, no, I can't accept that offer that's a little bit higher than it seems to make sense because one is allowing me to do the other. And so that balance has allowed me to make the most of both. And hopefully, if I can maintain that balance long term, then I don't have to worry when one comes because I know the other one's coming as long as I keep my ear to the ground and keep on doing that work.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that's one of the suggestions that I give, especially to my clients that are in what I call the healing world. So they're helping heal people physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. They have a lot of challenges around charging money for their services because, like you said, most of the people I work with are very heart centered. They just want to change the world. They want to leave their legacy. But at the same time, we live in a world where money rules the world, right?
Hmm.
So they have a sliding scale where they can, have those big fees where they're being paid their worth in specific markets. But then they also have a sliding scale where they can give an in kind gift back to that prospective nonprofit, foundation, company
Yeah.
that doesn't have that big budget while not undervaluing or undermining their worth and their value, which is super important for having a business, but also, stepping into your worth and your value as a business owner. So that's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. All right, we're going to wrap up with two rapid fire questions. Lambers, what is the best one piece of advice you would share with others today?
Well, the one thing that has had the biggest impact for me in almost any environment that I'm in is recognizing that you don't need to know everything about everyone in order to have a positive impact on someone. There's always going to be someone who knows more than you, who has different skills than you, but that doesn't mean that that disqualifies you from being able to help, whether it be from certain experiences or things learned. We always have something to offer. The challenge is identifying what it is and then owning it to say, okay, let me offer what I can and have the self-esteem enough to learn from somebody else who has that strength that I don't have. And hopefully, if it's mutually beneficial, then we can all benefit someone at some point and be benefited by someone else as well with our self-esteem intact.
You heard it from Lambers. Own it and share your brilliance and your gift. And Lambers, what's the legacy you wish to leave behind?
Oh, that's a great one. The legacy I hope to leave behind is that even the things that seem the most difficult can be a lot more easy to accomplish if we are genuinely trying to give as much as we have, as often as we have. Not too much, not too little, not overextending ourselves, but also identifying what we have to give from a genuine place of love and care for others, because that genuine care for others can be the lasting impact we have on others more so than any one thing that we share. But that feeling of, oh, I appreciate how they made me feel. And I look forward to having that impact on moving forward.
Yeah, the giver's gain gift that keeps on paying and makes us feel good, and also, in a lot of ways, fills our own cup. That is a beautiful answer, a beautiful legacy. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights, wisdom, and inspiration with our listeners. For anyone who's here and you're thinking, gosh, I want to work with Lambers personally on some personal development gaps or for a training for your organization, his contact information, all of his social media contacts and links will be in our show notes, as well as if you're viewing this on YouTube, they'll be in the comments below. I highly recommend you reach out to Lambers. He's got a really amazing gift and ability, and we really value having him as a guest on the podcast. Thank you again, Lambers.
Thanks, Ali. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And to our listeners, we'll see you on our next episode. Thanks. Thank you for joining the show today. I hope you were inspired. More importantly, I hope you take action. If the show inspired you, I ask that you subscribe and share it with your network. Let's spread inspiration together today.